Thank you. Okay, good morning. We'll start. Okay, this is where we left yesterday. We had started the wireless stuff, and the most important estimator is the wireless 17 equation, that is x transpose x inverse x transpose y. This is the estimator for the unknown betas in the wireless regression. And this was an example. Just consider regression of y on a constant, a time trend, and independent variable. This is how the normal equations will look like. So you solve these normal equations, we get the unknown parameters, beta 1, beta 2, beta 3. We solve these normal equations for beta 1, beta 2, beta 3. Of course, doing this without help of matrix is very, very, very tedious. So we always take the help of the matrix, use that other estimator. Virtually every package does it for you. This is just an example how to understand this example. Just take three observations, and then you can do the whole stuff. You can generalize it to n variables. That's the way I look at it. From the least squares normal equations, we also have minus x transpose E equal to 0. And so every column of xk, the first column of x, if the first column of x is column of 1, so this implicitly means that the regression model has a constant term or an intercept term, which would denote iota. Then there are three implications. The residuals sum to 0. This is another implication. The regression hyperplane passes through the points of means of the data. This is in non-technical language, hyperplane is simply the fit. The fitted values from the regression equals the mean of the actual values. So this implication follows from 1 because the fitted values are y hat x beta. It is important to take note that this will break down if the regression does not constrain a constant term. Okay. Now we'll start today's lecture from here. Projection. What is this projection stuff? Projection stuff in putting it non-technical way, it is forecasting only. Okay, so in the language of econometrics or time series, we are always interested in the univariate time series stuff. You're always interested in forecasting or projection or prediction. We'll all use these words interchangeably. So given data up to y1 to yt, we are interested in knowing what will be yt plus 1. Okay, and this is what is called in forecasting parlance out of sample forecasting. The in-sample forecasting are simply the forecast, the fitted values. That's it. Whichever way you look at it, the in-sample forecasting or the fitted values are one step, what they call is one step ahead forecast. Don't worry about the one step ahead forecast. We just say fitted values. Okay, so this leads to what is called the projection analysis. What is the projection analysis? What is this projection? What is a projection matrix? You will see later on it is nothing but x beta xb. What is this projection? The vector of least squares residuals is e hat y minus xb, y less 18. Inserting y less 17 gives this my. This is a very important matrix in econometrics. The n by n matrix is a fundamental matrix in regression analysis. This is both symmetric, that is m equal to m transpose, and idempotent. You multiply m with m, it will result in the same matrix. So you can go on multiplying like this. Given 18, we can interpret m as a matrix that produces the vector of least squares residuals. So give y less 19. You just pre-multiply the given observations on y with this matrix, produces the residuals straight away. Interpret m as a matrix that produces the vector of least squares residuals in the regression of y on x when it multiplies any vector y. Sometimes it will be useful to call it a residual maker. So quickly you can check this mx equal to 0, m e hat is e hat. You can quickly check that mx equal to 0 and m e hat equal to e hat. What is a possible interpretation of y less 20? That is, if X is regressed on itself, will be a perfect fit, will result in 0 residuals. OLS 18, OLS 18, oh, OLS 18, where is OLS 18? Okay, OLS 18 also imply that y equal to xb plus e hat, which is the sample analog of OLS 15. What was OLS 15? OLS 15 was this. Is OLS 15. OLS 50. This is OLS 50. This is wrong. Okay. What I mean to say is the y equal to x beta plus e. So that's what I'm trying to say. Okay. It's not 15, something else. I'll change the number. The least squares results partition y into 2 parts. The fitted values y hat is equal to xb and the residuals e hat. Since mx is equal to 0, these 2 parts are orthogonal. What is orthogonal? Orthogonal matrices. Have you heard of orthogonal matrices and orthogonal vectors? Are people there?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, can we say that? Yeah.
Sir,
Hello?
if two vectors are orthogonal, it means that the dot product or the inner product is 0. That is, they are perpendicular to each other. And if the two matrices are orthogonal, we have to say that A prime is I.
A prime is I. It transpose is the inverse, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so now we can see that 2 parts are orthogonal because this will be a vector and E hat vector. You can substitute it and see since mx is equal to 0, these 2 parts are orthogonal. You can easy to see that. From OLS 18, okay, y hat equal to y minus E hat, I minus m equal to y, and this is py. What is the projection matrix? P is a projection matrix. Okay, what is it? That's what I'm telling you. Projection matrix is nothing but one that when you pre-multiply the given observation y, it gives y hat the fitted values. In forecasting literature, this is nothing but one step ahead forecast or simply forecast. The fitted values in forecasting literature is nothing but one step ahead forecast or simply forecast. And in this econometrics language, the same thing as projecting projecting this matrix onto this vector will give you the fitted residuals. It is a matrix formed from X such that when a vector y is pre-multiplied by P, the result is the fitted values in the least squares regression of y on X. All these tell you that it's not even necessary to fit a matrix and get the unknown estimator. You have a linear algebra package, it'll do it for you. All these things are based or towards that particular stuff only. Okay, we'll come back to the, okay, I don't know whether I'll come back to this MMSE and all. Okay. This also the projection of the vector y into the column space of X. The column space of a matrix is a vector space spanned by its column vector. Simply the number of columns in the given matrix will give you the column space. And if I have a k by k matrix, the column vectors normally is dimensional column space is also k, but it need not be. It can be less than k if any one of the column is a linear combination of any other columns. It can be less than k also. Okay. Now that P is also symmetric and idempotent. That is PM also PM equal to MP equal to 0. All this you can go and check. And M and P are orthogonal matrices. So and Px equal to X. In manipulating least squares results, the following equivalent expressions for the sum of squared residuals are often useful. You don't know when you will be using it, but this it's good to have it. You can easily check that these two are true. These two expressions are in fact true. Now we'll see what's called a partition regression. This partition regression is going to lead us to a very important theorem, which is called the Frisch-Wag theorem. You'll be very surprised to know that this was the theorem, in my estimation, this is the first theorem in econometrics, and it was published way back in 1933. And it was put on a firmer footing by Lowell after 30 years later in 63. But it's always called the Frisch-Wag theorem, and it was published in the very first issue of Econometrica way back in 1933. But the usefulness of the theorem is just very amazing. And this theorem, you'll wonder why we need it. We need it for many times for theoretical purposes, and we may need it many times for if you have a large panel data setup, and if you're interested only in a particular segment and a particular country. So you don't have to run the whole panel and everything. This is the advantage of the Frisch-Wag theorem. One has to keep in mind the Frisch-Wag theorem was written or was established way back in 1933 when computing was not known. Computers were not known. Computing, everything was extremely difficult. People are working with calculators and other things. So that is the importance of Frisch-Wag theorem. What does the theorem tell you? Before that, you understand what is called a partition regression. I have a regression with two sets of variables, x1 and x2. So x beta plus equal to x1 beta 1 plus x2 beta 2 plus e. What is the algebraic solution for an estimator for beta 2 alone? Have you heard of this term partitioned inverses?
No, sir.
They're very complicated. Okay, so we can use the partitioned inverses to obtain an estimator beta 2 for beta 2, which is B2. But we'll obtain the same solution through a more general result called the Frisch-Wag theorem. What does it tell you? Go through it. In the linear least squares regression of vector y on two sets of variables x1 and x2, the subvector B2 is a set of coefficients obtained when the residuals from a regression of y on x1 alone are regressed on the set of residuals obtained when each column of x2 is regressed on x1. Go through it and I'll ask you a question. What it exactly means. Okay, based on this, I'll ask you a question. I have originally this matrix y is equal to x beta plus e is a 50x. My x is a 50 by 5 matrix. What does that mean? I have n 50 observations and 5 independent variables. I'm breaking it up into x1 and x2, where x1 will be 50 by 3, for example. Then x2 will be 50 by 2. So what does that mean? What does this mean? What does this mean? I'm interested in get an estimator for beta 2. I'm interested in getting B2. So what does this mean? What are the steps involved?
Sir, can you repeat the question once?
Do you see the original model? Y is equal to x beta plus E. I'm partitioning into this. My original model, suppose I have my X is a 50 by 5 matrix. What does that mean? I have n 50 observations and 5 independent variables. I'm breaking it up into 2. Beta 1, if x1 is 50 by 3 and x2 is 50 by 2. I'm interested in getting an estimator for beta 2. That is, I'm interested in getting B2. So what does this mean? Abhik Gupta, do you understand it? Do you understand the question?
Yes, sir. I understand
What
the question.
what does this mean? Tell me the answer. Do you have an answer?
So thinking. So I'm thinking.
You're still thinking? Okay. Sanjana Mohan, do you have the answer?
No, sir.
Okay. Devesh,
Yes, sir.
you have done this before. How do you do this?
Sir, first we regress y on x1, we get a residual term,
Yeah.
and we regress x1 on x2, and we get residual term. And then we regress both the.
What do you mean by
and-
x1, x2? What do I mean by x1 alone or regress on the sets of residuals obtained when each column of x2 is regressed on x1? What do I mean by this?
each column of x2 means each feature of x2, like each of the one column represents one feature or one independent variable.
What will be the dependent variable?
So x2 will be dependent and
x2
x1
is a
will
matrix,
be
a 50 by 2
Yeah.
matrix.
So if you said ki x2 has 2 components and x1 has 3 independent variables.
Correct.
So and suppose we take x21 and x11, we can do it regression like this: x22 and x12, and then we
What will be
obtain
what will be the third step regression?
Then a third will be we obtain one residual from the first equation, that is y on x1, and the second will be we regress x2 on x1 and x2i on x1i. Then we regress both of the residuals, and then we obtain the respective betas.
Okay, more or less correct. Okay. Now, this is what we do. To prove this theorem, let us suppose that the regression involves two sets of variables, x1 and x2. The normal equations are this. We first solve for B1. How do we do this? How do we go about it? We first solve for B1 by manipulating the equations in OLS 22, and we get this OLS 23. But this is not what we want. We want B2. Okay, look at this. So what does the solution state? What does the solution state? Can you make out anything from OLS 23? Solution state that B1 is a set of coefficients in the regression of y on x1 minus a correction vector. Can you see that? The correction vector is nothing but x1 transpose x2 b2.
Sir, effect of x2 has been minused.
Too much noise. Who is this?
Sir, Dipali.
It's too much noise. What is your question? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. What's your question?
Sir, I'm saying that this OLS 23, I think, states that effect of x1, that is, we are calculating b1, is actually total effect minus x2 b2, effect of x2 on y.
X1 transpose x2 b2.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so minus a correction vector. That is a correction vector.
Yes, sir. So it shows the partial effect by cancelling out the partial effect of x2.
Yes, but b2 is what we need. Okay, not b1. So how do we proceed? So b2 is what we need. Suppose for now the two sets of variables x1 and x2 are orthogonal. That is x1 transpose x2 equal to 0. Then b1 will be simply x1 transpose x1, x1 transpose x1 inverse x1 transpose y, which is simply the coefficient vector in the regression of y on x1. If they are not orthogonal, then Frisch-Walk theorem will help us to estimate the coefficient vectors. To enable that, know that the second equation OLS 22, this is second equation OLS 22, can be written this way. Insert b1 in OLS 23 into this result, and this produces x2 transpose y. After collecting terms, the solution is simply b2 equal to x2 transpose m1 x2 inverse x2 transpose m1 y. This is the solution for b2. Okay. Now I'm going to drop a bombshell. What is this b2? This b2 will be exactly identical to if you run to this b2 if you run a multiple linear regression of OLS 21. That's it. That's it. You run a multiple linear regression of OLS 21. This b2, the estimator for b2, that is it, beta 2, that is b2, will be exactly equal to this estimate. So then, why do you need to do this Frisch-Walk theorem? Is a basic question. That's what I said right in the beginning. The Frisch-Walk theorem was written in 1933, okay, in a time series context. What was the time series context? People had time series data, they plotted it, and all the data had a visible trend in them. And in the later day parlance, the data were simply non-stationary. So what people were doing was the following. First step, they ran a time trend, alpha plus yt equal to alpha plus beta t, and they took the residual for further analysis. This ET are the so-called detrended variables. Okay, and then they ran the regression, whatever they wanted to do. Frisch-Walk proved, because computing was so costly, computing was basically unknown. Doing this step was so costly, they proved that you don't have to do it in 2 steps. Then what did they do? What did they suggest? You simply run a regression of y equal to alpha plus beta t, beta 1t, beta 2 x1, beta 2 x3, and go ahead with it. In one shot regression is enough rather than doing it in 2 stages. First running a regression on time trend, detrending it, taking it the residuals, and doing the regression. So this is not necessary. So they proved by proving what we have proved. What you are doing in 2 steps is the same as doing it in 1 step. That is the only advantage of Frisch-Walk theorem that was seen at the time it was published. So it's very timely publication. But then the later day use of Frisch-Walk theorem lies in establishing some theoretical results, number one. Number two, in panel data analysis. Suppose in panel data analysis, later on you'll see panel data is nothing but time series of cross section. We have time series data on over 50 years on about 15-20 countries. Okay, so this is a I as well as T. Suppose you are interested only in a particular country, there are estimators based on this Frisch-Walk theorem, which will tell you the estimates of that particular country alone. And there are packages that do it for you. You do not have to run the entire panel regression and then take out the estimators and all those stuff. Okay, these are the two advantages. First is theoretical advantage. In large panel, Frisch-Walk theorem also is useful, and Frisch-Walk theorem will be useful for our subsequent analysis also. Okay. The matrix appearing in the parenthesis inside each set of square brackets is the residual maker. Residual maker defined in OLS 19. In this case, defined for the regression in the columns of X1. Thus, the M1, X2 is the matrix of residuals. Each column of M1, X2 is a vector of residuals in the regression. You can go through all this stuff. By exploiting the fact that M1 is symmetric and idempotent, we can simply write it this way, which is the form known to us: X2 transpose, X2 star transpose, X2 star inverse X2, X2 star transpose Y star, and all this. So this is a fundamental result in regression analysis. This is what is called partialing out or netting out the effect of X1. Okay. Any question?
So can you go to the previous slide once?
This one? This one?
Yes, sir, yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So this is what is called partialing out or netting out the effect of X1. Regression with a constant term. As a corollary to the above points, one can note that the slopes in a multiple regression contains a constant term of time transforming the data to deviations from the means and then regressing the variable y and deviation form on the explanatory variables also in deviations form, all subtracted from the respective means. How do you retrieve the now you see, for example, I have a multiple linear regression. You can get the constant by running a simple linear, you can get the estimate of a constant by estimating the multiple linear regression in one shot, or you can take the deviations and you can estimate the coefficient vector which does not contain the constant term. Then how do you retrieve the constant term? This is how you retrieve the constant term. The idea behind this is simply the Frisch-Walk theorem. The constant term can be easily estimated as note as the first equation set of three equations discussed above. Partial correlations. This is exactly why the reason I was telling right in the beginning that the language, the partialing out, when we are talking of the coefficient beta 1, okay, so the language that is that when you are talking of the effect of X1 on the dependent variable, the normal language is the effect of other variables are fixed, okay, are kept constant. Actually, the language should be after taking into account the effects of whatever effect the other variables may have on X1. Okay, so that is exactly the correct language. But somehow in econometric textbooks also it is considered as fixed. I can understand it because it is fixed in the wireless context only, because the regressors are fixed up for experiment after experiment. That is correct. But it's a general thing that that language need not be correct. That has to be changed. The reason is this. What is partial correlation? A regression relating earnings to age and education enables us to compare the earnings of two individuals of the same age with the different education levels. Go through it. It is this characteristic of the regression that is implied by the term partial regression coefficients. We can obtain this result by first regressing income and education on age, and then compute the residuals from this regression. Any correlation between income and education is independent of age. My question is the following. Can we directly find the correlation between income and education? We can obtain this result by first regressing income and education on age and then compute the residues from this regression. My question is, any correlation between income and education is independent of age? Is there a way to find the correlation between income and education which is independent of age? What is this? This same principle can be applied to the correlation between two variables. To continue the above regression example, to what extent can we assert that the correlation is a direct one between income and education, rather than the fact that both income and education tend on average to rise as individuals become older? My question is, does age have any role to play in explaining the correlation between income and education? What is the question? What is the answer? Does age have any role to play in explaining the correlation between income and education? What do you think?
Yes, sir, there will be a correlation.
Okay, so third the bullet point. We want to check the correlation between income and education after accounting for age, whatever role that age can play or age may play. That particular correlation is called a partial correlation, which is calculated along the same lines as the partial regression coefficient. If you ask me a partial regression coefficient, the regression coefficient is as good as a partial correlation only. Okay, so that is why I repeatedly say we are not keeping others fixed. We are interested in a particular coefficient, regression coefficient, after taking into account whatever role the other variables may play. So look at this. The partial correlation coefficient between income and education after accounting for the effect of age is obtained as follows. The residuals in the regression of income on a constant and age, the residuals in the regression of education on a constant and age. The partial correlation is a simple correlation between Y star and Z star. This follows again the Frisch-Wald theorem only. Okay. Yeah.
Sir, are you
Yeah.
able to hear me? Yes, sir. Sir, I'm a bit confused. Which is the dependent and the independent variable?
Income on a constant and age. Income is the dependent variable.
Okay, sir. So this is similar to the methodology we just saw. We did
Yes.
3 regressions, right?
Yes. Yes. Is it okay?
Yes, sir.
How do we get this partial correlation? Is next. The competition looks formidable, not now. An easier way to calculate the square of the partial correlation coefficient is to use the following formula. Assuming that there is a constant in the regression, the vector of residuals Y star and Z star have 0 sample means because they are residuals of 0 sample means. So the squared partial correlation coefficient is this, OLS 25.1. What is a convenient shortcut is available? What is the shortcut? You know what the shortcut is? First, compute the multiple regression of income on education and age. The T ratio to test the hypothesis the coefficient equals 0 can be used to compute this particular. What is that coefficient equals 0? T square is a square of the T ratio for testing the hypothesis that the coefficient on Z is 0 in the multiple regression of Y on X and Z. Proving 25.2 is messy, but it's quite straightforward, extremely messy. This is a shortcut for you. T is nothing but the statistic that you use, T-stat that you get in the multiple regression of income on education, income with a constant, regress on a constant age and education. Interested in correlation, this is it now. This is how you calculate. You can extend it to any other sets of equations also, but only thing it becomes messier and messier. Partial correlation is something that I always wanted to introduce, which is so useful in time series analysis also. Now let's go to the next important topic, that is the goodness of fit. Okay, now we have fit the regression. Yeah.
So can you again explain the interpretation of R square, Y and Z? Like why, like how do we explain
instead of calculating 25.1?
Yes, sir.
I'm giving you a shortcut to calculate the correlation, partial correlation between income and age, to show whether age plays any role in explaining whatever correlation that could be between income and education.
Yes, sir. Y square, that I'm not getting. Like why we are taking R square? Why R square is equal to rho square? Is that relation we are taking into account?
R square is equal to rho square.
Like when we regress Y on X1 and X1 on Y, then we find rho.
That correlation is always there in the single variable analysis. Remember, simple variable relation, the square of quotient is the R square. Do you remember that relation?
Yes, right.
That's the reason why we take it.
Yes, sir, got it.
So goodness of it. How do we know how well the explanatory variables have explained the dependent variable? This is exactly what we have selected. We have a problem. We have a dependent variable. We have selected some sort of independent variables. We have run the regression. We would like to know how good our selection of independent variables has been, whether the model has explained. Whole idea of regression, any regression or any model setup is that to explain the variation or the variance in the dependent variable. So we would like to have a metric or a measure to say how much variance or variation in Y has been explained by the set of independent variables. The one measure that is universally used in especially single in linear regression, whether it is single or multiple linear regression, is called the R square. Regression goodness of it is called R square. Okay, in time series also we use R square, but it has less significance in the time series context. This is very much important, very useful, and very important in the cross-section context. So what is a metric? Metric is called R square, which you'll come to know. The original fitting criterion, the sum of squared residuals, suggests a measure of the fit of the regression to the data, regression line to the data. Go through them. OLS consists of two parts, fitted values and residuals, so that for each I, yi equal to y hat plus ei hat for any observation. The fitted values and residuals are uncorrelated in the sample. Define the following quantities now. Total sum of squares. Sum of squares, explain the sum of squares. I have defined it in a slightly different way from the books. Total sum of squares is this. Explain the sum of squares is this. Error sum of squares. The sum of squares are residuals. So total sum of squares is a measure of sample variation in yi's, and TSS by n minus 1 will give you the sample variance. Sum of squares, explain the sum of squares measures the sample variation in yi hat, and the SSR measures the sample variations in the errors. So the total sum of squares is nothing but explain sum of squares plus sum of square residuals, so that it will be equal to 1. So this gives you a goodness of fit measure. Goodness of fit measures how well the regression line fits the data and is measured by a number called R square of the regression, also called the coefficient of determination. Some people call it coefficient of multiple determination. The coefficient of determination, and is defined to be R square is equal to 1 minus sum of squares residuals, the residual sum of squares by total sum of squares. By definition, R square will be between 0 and 1. R square can also be shown to be equal to the squared correlation coefficient between the actual y and the fitted values. This is another useful formula. Look at this. Can be shown to be the squared correlation coefficient between the actual values and the fitted values. Many econometrics books carry this formula also. So this should be as high as possible for the regression to be good. Note that in the above formula, we have used the average of y to be true to the formula of the correlation coefficient. Okay. Also, we know that this average equals y bar. Okay, now this is fine. This is immaterial. R square never decreases, but it usually increases when another independent variable is added to the regression. Next, we formalize this result. You know where I'm going. For those students or those who have done econometrics will realize where I'm going. R square never decreases, but it usually increases when another independent variable is added to the regression. We formalize this result. Let R square xz go through it. R square xz be the coefficient of determination in the regression of y on x and z. R square x be the same in the regression of y on x only. R star yz be the partial correlation between y and z, controlling for x. Then this will be the thing. What can you say about the R square of the larger regression?
One.
And what can you say about the R square of the larger regression? That is the first bullet point.
It will be more than the R square of just y on x.
Okay, look at this. R square, the longer regression can never be smaller. Can we claim this?
Yes.
Saurav?
Yes, sir.
Saurav, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is Saurav Kumar Mahato? Have we talked before?
On no, sir.
This is the first time I'm talking to you.
Yes, sir.
So how is it going for you? You have any connectivity problems and other problems at your place?
No, sir. Sometimes the network goes, but on an overall basis, it's fine.
Where are you from?
Sir, Jharkhand.
Okay. So you get it. How is it going for you? The course is too fast, too slow?
A bit fast, but
Uh,
I hope I would catch on.
How do you find the PPTs helpful? You can understand from the
Uh,
PPTs?
yes, sir, the PPTs are fine. Just I think the course is huge overall. The PPTs are fine.
Okay. Okay. So how do you answer this question? Do you think the R square is the longer regression can never be smaller? Do you get to the point from what 26.1? Mahato,
Sorry, sir.
do you get this? The R square in the longer regression can never be smaller. Do you get this from 26.1?
Um,
Given this, for example, this is the stuff.
can you repeat that again, sir? I don't think I get that.
See the bullet point. You have 26.1 and all these bullet points R square xz, the coefficient determination, the regression of y and x and additional variable z. Okay, R square is just R square and x alone. R square xz is R square on x plus z. So I'm claiming that R square in the longer regression, that is R square xz, can never be smaller than R square x. Do you get it from 26.1? That is the question.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Now, given this result, is it tempting to exploit this result by just keep on adding variables to the model so that R square will continue to rise to its limit of 1. Okay, this is too tempting, but this comes at a cost. Since the parameter estimates become progressively less precise as we do so, this leads to a measure which will penalize or imposes a penalty on adding variables that need not be added. Okay, more variables you add, it imposes a penalty on the goodness of it. So the fact that R square never decreases when any variable is added to regression model makes it a poor tool for deciding if one variable or several variables should be added to a model. So the factor that should determine whether an explanatory variable belongs in the model is whether the explanatory variable has a non-zero partial effect on y in the population. So this is very important. So this hypothesis can be tested, but we shall show later. But for now, we'll introduce another measure, which is normally called the adjusted R square or the R bar square, okay, which will impose a penalty for adding explanatory variables, rather unnecessary explanatory variables. Later on, we are going to see the effect of not including a relevant independent variable, and it's the consequences of including explanatory variables, irrelevant explanatory variables. Okay, this leads to what is called omitted variable bias. But before that, we'll see this. Another statistic called adjusted R square, adjusted for degrees of freedom, which incorporates a penalty for adding additional independent variables to a model, is recommended. Most regression packages will report, along with R square, the adjusted R square, written sometimes called R bar square. R square estimates sigma square E by SSRN, which we know to be biased. No, we don't know. It is still to be established. It comes later. So we can replace SSR by N with SSR by N minus K minus 1. Also, we can use SSR by N minus 1 in place of TSS by N, as the former is unbiased estimator of sigma square Y. Okay, now using this estimator, we arrive at the adjusted R square as shown below. What is adjusted R square? 1 minus sigma hat square by TSS by n minus 1. This is what is reported by all packages. Sigma hat square is equal to SSR by n minus k minus 1. So this is the one that is normally reported, but computer packages will give you both R square as well as R bar square. Many times you will see the huge gap between R square and R bar square. So that is an indication of probably there are some variables that should not be there. For computational purposes, the connection between R square and R bar square is this. So if you already calculate R square and you have no means of calculating R bar square, you can calculate it this way using this particular formula. Okay. The primary attractiveness of adjusted R square is that it imposes a penalty for adding extra independent variables to a model. The adjusted R squares may decline when a variable is added to the set of independent variables, and you'll also get a very strange result, R square getting negative. Adjusted R square getting negative. Consider this example. A negative R bar square indicates a very, very poor model. You just completely drop that model. How do you conclude whether a particular addition of a particular variable has contributed to the R square or to the fit, or how it improves the goodness of fit will depend on if the contribution of the new variable to the fit of the regression more than offsets the correction for the loss of extra variable. I have a metric without proving it. Okay, what is that metric? A related interesting fact is that if you add a new independent variable to regression, R bar square increases if and only if the t statistic on the new variable is greater than 1 in absolute value. Both the results can be proved, but for now you just take it as a statement or a theorem without proof. An extension, R bar square increases when a group of variables is added to a regression if and only if the F statistic or the joint significance of the new variable is greater than unity. So this is a metric that you can always use to see whether addition of a new variable or addition of a new set of variables has contributed to the goodness of it. This is a handy tool to have.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So what does this mean? T statistic on the new variable is greater than 1 in the absolute value?
Yeah. You calculate the calculated T statistic. Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir.
You have a regression of R square and X, all right? You have to keep on saying yes, otherwise I won't know whether you will do that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Now the second regression, you add a variable Z and then again you run the regression. Okay?
Okay.
You have a T statistic on the Z. Hello?
So 1 in the absolute value, what this T statistic is that of
T statistic can take negative values also, correct? Who is this? Gandhi. Hello?
Sir, I also don't get the logic why it has to be greater than 1. Like, for example, we can see if it's significant at certain level of alpha
No,
or not.
Devesh, I'm saying this without proof. Devesh,
Yes, sir. Okay, okay.
I'm saying this without proof. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Hello,
Who was the
sir.
earlier?
Yes,
Who
sir.
was the
Yes,
earlier
sir.
one? Gandhi. Gandhi was the earlier one. Who was the one who asked me
Yes,
earlier?
yes, sir. Sir,
Now
my
you get
connection was lost.
no. Now you get this the first bullet point.
So actually, I wasn't able to listen to you because the connection was lost. Could you repeat?
No. First you run a regression of R square on X. X is a set of independent variables. Okay.
Mm,
Now I'm adding another variable Z.
okay.
Run a multiple linear regression again.
Mm,
Okay. Calculate the T statistic for that coefficient to be 0. Can you calculate the T statistic to check if the coefficient is statistically significant from 0 or not? Can you calculate the T stat?
yes, sir. For the new variable, right? The t.
Yeah, for the new variable.
Yeah.
If the calculated T stat is greater than 1 in absolute value, then that variable is going to add to the goodness of it. R bar square increases. Can we do now? You get it?
Oh, okay, sir. So it's
So
like whether it's significant or not, that test, right?
yes,
For
exactly.
what we do for beta z
The
equal to
same.
0 or
Yes,
not.
the
Okay.
same thing. The same T stat that the packages produces for you.
Okay.
The second bullet point is for a set of variables.
Sir,
Yeah.
just another doubt. So, sir, there has been instances where if you add a new variable, then the t-stat for that variable may not be significant. It may be insignificant, but then your F statistic is significant for the combined regression.
No. Wait a minute. Set of variable or one variable?
Sir, F statistics for the set of variables, but I'm talking about that is the second regression. As for the first regression, it's we compute the t-stat for one variable, right? The variable which is added.
No variable. There's only one variable. There's no question of F stat there.
No, sir. When you're adding a variable to the regression model, its coefficient may be insignificant.
Correct.
But its F statistic, can be significant. That is the F statistic of that entire regression. Basically, you are comparing both the regressions, right?
No. Wait a minute, Pramila. There's a problem. I have previously run with 5 independent variables, for example. Okay.
Okay.
Now you have to keep on saying yes. Otherwise, I won't know whether you are there or not. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes.
I am adding a 6th variable now. The first bullet point.
Yes.
I would like to know whether this has added to the goodness of it.
Exactly.
Okay, so you will get a t-stat. First of all, you will get a t-stat to see whether it is statistically significant from 0.
Yes, for the 6th variable. Yeah.
Okay, suppose it is calculated, but only thing is t-stat turns out to be significantly different from here. It was meaning the t-stat could be 1.5. For example, the t-stat is 1.5. It is not significant at the 5% level. Can you say this?
Yes.
Individually, but it is greater than 1 in absolute value.
Yeah, of course.
So what does it mean? According to this bullet point, it does contribute to the overall fit.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that is exactly what this first bullet point tells you.
Yeah, got it.
What is the second bullet point? If instead of I had initially 5 variables, now I'm adding 3 more variables.
Okay.
So I want to check if jointly if the 3 more variables contribute to the overall fit.
Yes, sir. I understood the second point. It's jointly for the new variables, but we can compare, if say we are taking the case of one variable, if that variable has improved the overall fit of or not. You can do that by comparing the R square of the old regression with the R square of the new regression. And then
That's
again, that is
Yeah.
also, yeah.
That's also possible. That's also possible. Now we have to have a comparison of R square. Okay, there is I don't have the formula. There is a formula for that. How do you compare two R squares? Am I right? Now you are comparing R squares. In the second thing, first thing, I am not comparing R square. Okay, that's another question. But this T status is greater than one absolute value, but the R square is hardly increased, say from 0.5 to 0.55. Now you would like to see whether that is a significant increase or not.
Significant increase or not, yeah.
Okay, that can be checked. That can be checked. But I'm not giving you that. But R squares can be checked. You can even check covariances also. There is a formula. I'll tell you. You can also check whether the covariance, I mean, a related thing. You can also check whether the two covariances are significant or not. I have not given you a measure for that, but there is a measure available. I'll send you by the next, along with the next. What's it, the slide, along with this slide somewhere, and also tell you how to check whether R square is a significant increase is there in R square or not, rather R bar square is not. It is there in Hagen-Craig, by the way. It is there in Hagen-Craig, by the way. Okay, now
Yes,
can we?
sir.
Yeah?
Sir, it's just that I noted this one interesting point when I read. You know, your T statistic can be insignificant, as quoted here. You said T can be, it's insignificant at 5% level if you take 1.05.
Yeah.
But your overall fit will increase when you compare the F statistic.
Possible, possible.
Okay.
This is a classic question of whether you should go by F test or T test.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, I always go by the F test. But there is a set of econometrician which you swear by T test, but I go by F test.
Okay, sir.
Okay. It has been suggested that R square does not penalize the loss of degrees of freedom heavily enough. This particular criterion could be new to many of you. Okay, so additional parameters, additional measures of fit have been suggested in the literature. What is that? The first one is based on Amemia's prediction criterion. This is R tilde square j equal to 1 minus n plus kj by kj by 1 minus rj square, where j is nothing but the model that you are comparing. Some alternatives have been proposed for comparing models, which can be indexed by j. The first one is based on Amemia's prediction criterion. Okay, you tell me what do you understand by? Tell me what you understand by this measure, prediction criterion.
So the penalty has been increased this time from millimeter n minus 1 to n plus kj.
Yeah, who is this?
Nilesh.
Yeah, Nilesh. No, that is okay. But you understand this? What do you mean by the index j?
There are many models and there are J models, like for example, the jth model. We are calculating for the jth model.
The initial model, for example, I have, what do you understand by this? Suppose I have R square from a model of y and x independent variable and 5 independent variables. Now I'm adding a 6th independent variable. Okay, so that will be another model. You can model it for first one by 1 and the second one by 2. Now I'm going to calculate the R bar square of the second model. This is now called R tilde square. You can calculate adjusted R square this way, and this is going to tell you whether the addition of the sixth explanatory variable has improved your goodness of fit or not. At the same time, penalizing you for adding that extra variable. That's exactly what it tells you.
Please repeat, sir, once again.
No, suppose you have originally a regression model with 5 independent variables, okay?
Yes, sir.
You'll have one R bar square, correct?
Yes, sir.
You add the 6th variable, you can have another R bar square, am I right?
Yes, sir.
But addition of penalty variable must be penalized.
Yes, sir.
Okay, the R bar square that we get suggested is not, people are saying that is not strong enough. So Amemia has suggested this R bar square.
Yes, sir.
J equal to 1 will be the model with 5 independent variables. J equal to 2 will be the model with 6 independent variables. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So instead of, when you add the 6th variable, instead of using the R bar square from the previous formula, Amemia says use this R bar square. That's it.
So what will be the values of, like, for first model will be K1 and for second model will be K2. So what will be the value?
K1 will be a first, K the number of independent variables in the first model.
All right.
K the number.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yes, sir.
And sir, RJ square, what is that?
RJ square will be, for example, will be the R square from the previous model.
With one less
Five independent variable that I said.
And this then what will be the R square of the 6th model? Like, do we we are calculating that?
The left hand side. Okay. So he is giving a formula to calculate the R bar square from the R square from the lesser model, from the smaller model. Can we say this? Rishan, is okay?
Yes, sir.
Now, some other measures, you must have some of you must have definitely heard of this measure, Akaike information criterion, Bayes information criterion. Have you heard of this? Econometrics, statistics people?
Yes.
So these are for time series, right? AIC, PIC.
Who is this? Kumar?
Sir, Adrish.
Adrish? Adrish, no,
Yes.
this is
Yes,
for,
sir.
this is not necessarily for time series model. Okay, this can be used in any situation where you have to compare two models, two competing models. Understood?
Okay.
Okay, and what is the way to interpret this model? So for whichever model, AIC or BIC is the minimum, you select that model. That's it. This is the interpretation. The statistics students, Kanika, Drishan, and all those, you must have definitely come across this.
Sir, I haven't.
Sir, even I haven't.
Okay, there are two criterion, AIC, BIC. This is called Akaike information criterion, Bayes information criterion, or Schwarz information criterion. You can take it from me now. Okay, when do you use this? There are two other criterion, or there are two other criteria also. What is that? Akaike final prediction error criterion and Hanankin criterion. These four will I always introduce the time series lectures. Okay, now take it from me. You have been given four criteria, which one to use. Okay, number one, if you are interested in getting a model whose estimates are consistent, use Hanankin criterion. I am not giving you the Hanankin criterion. Two, if you are interested in getting a model that will give me excellent forecast, use either AIC or another criterion which is called Akaike's final prediction error criterion. Okay, now these three are there. What is the fourth one? Bayes information criterion or Schwarz information criterion. This is the information criterion I always use and I like the most. The reason is you can use the Schwarz information criterion or the Bayes information criterion, also called BIC, when you are not sure about why you are estimating a model. I'm not sure what I'm aiming at. Forecasting, I'm not sure. Consistent estimates, I'm not sure. Okay, whether my model, I'm interested in a model which will be in the parameter, which will give me a set of parameters which is there in the true parameter space. I do not know. When you do not know anything, when you are not sure of the objectives, use BIC, Schwarz information criterion. Okay, my experience is always use BIC. Forget others. Always use BIC. So how do you use it? I have 10 competing models. I calculate BIC for everything. The packages will give you the Schwarz information criterion, Schwarz, SCHWARZ. This is the same thing as Bayes information criterion. You keep all these things, you select that model for which BIC is the minimum. Understood? So this is it, plain and simple, period. Okay, remember, this is not for any time series purposes. You can use it for any situation where you have to select from competing models. These are called information criteria selection. Okay, IC. Okay, now let's go to the other one. Properties of least squares, right? Okay. What do you mean by that? Any question? Can you go? Any questions, Rishan?
No, sir.
Okay. Okay, any question? Nilesh Kumar Karnika, who is this? Ujjaval?
Yes, sir.
Ujjaval, okay, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, how do you follow this?
Uh,
Too fast?
right. Yes, sir, following.
Okay. Ujjaval, okay, Saurabh Kumar, other things, Rishan Banerjee, Devesh, Chitralekha, Vidyaparna Mitra?
Yes, sir.
Okay, are you following?
Yes, sir.
Okay, Ayush Agarwal.
Yes, sir.
Can you go to the next step? This is an important, it's an important area. Okay, properties of least squares. Properties of least squares. Okay, now you ask the question. You only asked why least squares. This is a question that could be there in that could be uppermost in most of your minds. Are there no other ways of estimating the unknown parameters? Of course, there are other ways to estimate unknown parameters. The second bullet point tells you absolute value. This is called the LAD estimators, the least absolute deviation. LAD estimates another area of econometrics. A lot of work has been done on that. Okay, and why least squares estimators? Okay, why? The third bullet point. The question of selecting the appropriate estimators depends on the statistical properties such as unbiasedness, consistency, efficiency, and the sampling distributions of the candidate estimators. Properties such as unbiasedness or the finite sample properties of estimators and finite sample properties of least squares estimators are independent of sample size. Okay, the linear model is one of the few settings in which definite statements can be made about finite sample properties of any estimator. So what does this tell you? Why least squares estimators? Least squares estimators, you have to compare the least squares estimators, the properties of least squares estimators, the properties of other estimators. Okay, let us come to linear estimators. When it comes to linear estimators, okay, and you can show, I don't know whether this was shown in, you can show that linear least squares estimators among all the classes of linear estimators produces estimators that results in minimum mean squared error, MMSE criterion. All the time series guys have been taught as MMSE criterion in forecasting. No answer. All these econometrics guys, have you come across this MMSE, minimum mean square error criterion?
Sir, that is what we are minimizing, like in E square, right?
That is exactly the least square. But what is the subtle difference is this? That will be the least squares estimators will be the best if you are confining yourself only to the linear forms of estimators. Okay, we can prove it, but no other function minimizes the sum of squares, minimizes the sum of squares better than the least squares estimator. So that is what is the idea of why we are restricted to least squares. Yeah.
Is that the same as like the UMVUE property?
What is the UMVUE?
Uniform minimum variance estimators.
No, that is different.
Oh.
Okay, so the question of selecting the.
So
Anyone else? Anyone else?
yes, sir. So minimum squared error is, I think, variance plus bias. So if bias is 0, so it is minimized. Minimum is squared error.
That is nothing but bias square, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay, so you can. That's what I was telling him. You can prove there if you are willing to confine yourself only to linear estimators, that that strand of literature proves in the forecasting that it is the wireless estimators that provide you the minimum mean square error estimator. Ideally, we would like this minimum mean square to be zero. Mean square to be zero. It will not be zero. The next ideal thing is minimize this mean square error. What is that estimator that minimizes mean square error, which is nothing but the least squares estimator? Okay, the only proviso is that you are confining yourself only to linear class, not any other class. Okay, if you are willing to accept that, then least square is the best. Okay, so properties such as unbiasedness of the finite sample properties, the linear model is one of the few settings in which definite statements can be made about the finite sample properties of any estimator. This is exactly the catch or the linear model, and hence least squares is, and hence the, what should I say, the omnipresence of least squares. Provided one is interested in least linear setting, least squares is the best. That provides you the minimum mean square error estimator, and hence the omnipresence of the predominance of least squares. Okay. However, in most cases, the only known properties are those that apply to large samples, that are the asymptotic properties. Okay, in most cases. In this section, we shall examine both the finite sample properties and asymptotic properties of least squares estimator. What do you mean by this is the following. So most cases, in only the few setting, linear model, however, will be useful. In many of the setting, linear model may not be of use. Okay, what do you do in that case? When the linear model is not in use, the only known properties are the loss scale property, loss sample properties, and asymptotic properties. Okay, so we shall examine both the finite sample properties and the asymptotic properties of the least squares estimator. We shall start with finite sample properties of least squares. Yeah, who is it?
Sorry, sir. Sir, I have a question. Shouldn't the minimum mean squared error estimator should be similar to OLS? Because if the estimator is unbiased, minimum squared is always equal to variance.
That is
So
exactly what I'm
OLS
saying.
is-
Kumar, that is exactly what I'm saying. What is that estimator that is going to minimize your mean square error?
It will be OLS, or minimum mean squared error.
That is the other way around. You know, not the way you are saying. OLS minimizes the mean square error. Not is the other way around. What is that estimator that minimizes the mean square error? This is the OLS estimator.
Yes, I got it.
Okay, and linear function, linear.
Yes, sir.
Hello,
Got it.
sir.
Yeah.
So, just a small clarification. When we talk of linear, we mean linearity in parameters, right?
Exactly. Understood. Yes, linearity in parameters, not in variables.
Okay.
That I have been saying right from the beginning.
Sir, but
There is
here we are
there is a
talking
statement.
about
There is a statement that says that we are not talking about non-linearity in non-linear in parameters. Okay. Who is this? Nilesh.
Yes, sir. So here we are talking about the parameters estimates, no?
Yeah.
So for the parameter estimates, we are, so as I remember, we used to say that it is linear in terms of I don't remember. So it was linear in terms of variables.
Parameters. Linear in terms of parameters. Linear in parameters. It can be non-linear in variables.
So we are talking about the model, that the model should be linear in terms of parameters.
Correctly. Yes. I should have beta 1 plus beta 1 x1, beta 2 x2, beta 3 x4 like that. I can have beta 1 x1 square also, but I cannot have beta 1 square x1. Do you get the point?
Yes, sir.
So this is non-linear in parameters. We are not considering such models.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Remember, OLS is nothing but linear combination. beta 1 x1, beta 2 x2, beta 3 x3. Okay, so that's exactly so. We are on safer ground there. What is an estimator? Estimator is a rule or a formula to use sample data from a population to obtain estimates of unknown coefficients. All these people, estimator, estimate, they have a lot of hair splitting over this. Okay, the concept of unbiasedness implies that on average, an estimator will correctly estimate the unknown parameters in question. So this is exactly the problem. What do you mean by unbiasedness? Because you have to understand conceptually what is happening in econometrics. Okay, what do you mean by this? Most of the time you have only one sample, and you have calculated, you have estimated the unknown coefficient vector beta, which is say B in our case. How can you say now expected value of B? How can you talk about the average or the mean when you have only one sample value? Okay, this is the conceptual experiment. Conceptual understanding is the following. Okay, the third bullet point. Here it is not clear how with one sample we can talk about the average. The conceptual point here is a fourth bullet point. In econometrics, we imagine we repeatedly sample from the population and characterize the behavior of the sample of the samples, while it is the statistical behavior of this estimator that provides us with a basis for this property. What do we mean by this? Suppose you have y equal to x beta plus e. Remember, for the least squares, x is given for repeated experiment. I have given x, I have a random sample, I have generated a random sample y by adding a random error term to that. The moment I have x, I have b from the estimated stuff. I have e, which I take from a random generator. I do everything. I have the right hand side, which will give me the left hand side variable y. I use this to calculate beta hat once again. Okay, this is the second experiment. You do the third experiment. You do this n number of times and take the average of all the betas, average of all the vectors. And if n is sufficiently large, expected average value of all these estimators will hopefully converge onto or converge into the unknown population vector beta. That is exactly what we mean when we say when we talk about unbiasedness, and that explains the third bullet point. How can you talk about average when you have only one estimator or only one sample? Okay. Do you get this? Can you go to this next point?
We have to just collect a sample size of n numbers, and we have to just repeat this experiment.
Yes, that is exactly the idea. What is the crucial thing? X given. X is the same for each and every random experiment. Okay. You have to draw a random error vector also. It just, you have already estimated beta. You have x. Now you have the e's also. Just add everything to get y. Estimate this to get a beta. Save it. You do this n number of times. Expected value of all these betas hopefully will go towards the unknown population parameter vector beta. So this is the whole idea of simulation. There is a simulation-based estimation also. The simulation-based estimation, this is what is done. But what we are doing is just taking only one sample, running, estimating, and we hope that we are correct. Okay, yes. We hope that we are correct. In normal times, we don't do this experiment. Draw random sample. We don't do that. No applied econometrician does that. Understood?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, so we repeat the experiment very large number of times, keep x fixed, find the random error vector and therefore y, and then we see that the estimate, the b which we get from all those things, the expected value is equal to the main thing, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Hopefully it will converge, not equal to, converge to the unknown population.
Okay.
Will converge to the unknown population vector. Okay. This is the idea of unbiasedness. Okay, unbiased estimation. The least squares estimate is unbiased in every sample. To show this, we write the following way. The second bullet point is called to write is known as writing the estimator in deviations form. In deviations form, we have already seen we are writing everything as deviations from the mean. Okay. Now this the second bullet point is exactly the same. Y b minus beta, which is nothing but the expected value of b, is the right hand side. X stands for x inverse, X stands for e. Never forget this form. We will use it again and again, and this is used in all theoretical exercises. This is the form that is used. This is the form that is used. This is called writing the parameters in deviations form. B minus beta. Take expectations and iterating over x. By assumption A3, the second term is 0. So expected value of bx is equal to b. And C, the 30th point. Y less 30. What is being used in OLS 30?
Iterated expectations.
LIE.
LIE. See how it uses LIE. Very, very important tool to have.
So what does this in the last bullet point is the subscript X?
Acha, okay, that is a subscript I have used. That is, I don't know, I never. Hello?
Yes.
Read this. Okay, the last subscript X you can ignore if it is confusing. Normally people write it that way.
All right.
Over the space, over the given X, that's why.
We are taking the expectation of already we have taken expectation of b given x equals to beta, and we are taking the expectation again of a constant. So
OLS 29 gives you OLS 29 tell you particular X.
So beta would be for the entire model. Like if it's a single explanatory variable, then we are talking about just one parameter apart from the constant one.
Which expression are you asking about? OLS 29?
So I get OLS 29. So I was asking about OLS 30. So why we're taking the expectation again?
What does law of iterated expectation tell you? Why are you doing this? Okay, OLS 29 is conditional on particular X.
Yes, sir.
Now OLS 30 gives you?
It's unconditional.
This is what we need. This is what we need to prove. This is OLS 29 tells you, okay, it is unbiased for a given X. OLS 30 tells you it is unbiased for any value of X, any value of X.
Okay, sir.
Okay, this X for every experiment, this X is the same, but any particular value of X. So that is why when we come from, this is very important. This is only conditional expectation, conditional on the given X. OLS 30 tells you no matter what X is, it will still be unbiased. So here it is where we have used the LIE so that EB not conditional on any X will still be equal to the population. Expected value of B will still be equal to the population parameter beta. Okay?
Okay, sir.
The interpretation of this result is that for any particular set of observations, the least square estimator has, okay, I have written it this way. Okay, what is that, Nilesh?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now you get this point. For any particular set of observation X, the least square estimator's expectation beta, no matter what X is.
It's the same thing that we were saying about repeating the
yes
experiment for a number of times.
Yes.
Okay.
When we average what possible values of X, we find that the unconditional mean is beta as well. Okay, you get the point now. The second, the first and second bullet point in the second one. So the y less 29 is particular x. When we are averaging over all x's also, it goes to, hopefully it will go, it is equal to the unknown parameter vector beta. Okay. The third bullet point, essentially the statement that EBX equal to beta means for the data we have observed, we can expect certain behavior of the statistics that we compute such a slope vector. By considering such statistics, we consider whether we learn from a particular sample can reasonably be extended to other samples if they were drawn under similar circumstances and from the same population, or what we learn from one sample can be inferred to the full population. Oh boy, okay. This is exactly, I think, in words, what y less 29 and y less 30 mean. Bias due to omission of relevant variables. Oh. It is 11:05. What's the next class? Macro or?
Yes, a macro class.
Okay. Kanika, you are very quiet today. What happened?
No, sir.
No question. That means you understood everything.
No, sir. Sir, I have to revise this part once again.
So I can ask you questions.
No, sir.
Oh, Drishan. Drishan.
Yes, sir.
You were also very quiet today.
So there were a lot of things which I was seeing for the first time. So.
Okay. The Frisch-Walk theorem. Have you not come across the Frisch-Walk theorem before?
No, sir.
Okay. It's very simple. You can go through it. I think I don't know about the same thing. Kumar, we did see the Frisch-Walk theorem last time, right?
Sir, I don't think so. I don't remember.
You don't? You don't remember?
Sir, I don't think so that we did this last time.
Hey, we did Frisch-Walk theorem last time. Come on. Yes, probably you bunked that lecture.
Sir, right. Sir, Paramila might confirm if she knows.
Paramila also bunked most of the lectures.
So yes, sir. Devesh can confirm, sir.
Paramila bunked most of the lectures, so she won't confirm. Devesh can confirm. He attended most of the lectures. Devesh?
Sir, we had done the Frisch-Walk theorem.
We did the Frisch-Walk theorem, right? Shibanjan also attended. Shibanjan?
Yes, sir.
Okay, now you see. Now these guys are retakers are more punctual and more, what should I say? They attend more classes. Why is the difference, Kumar and Paramila? Why
Sir,
this sudden?
maybe writing and we don't need to see blackboard.
And it's very clear with the PPT, sir, because everything is already written and you're explaining from that.
Yeah.
So we could understand your explanations easier.
My handwriting was a big problem. I remember that. I know that.
And so this time you're going slow and we are understanding everything. Last time it was bit more fast, especially econometric part, because we did not have time.
Oh. Okay, let's see. Okay, we'll continue with this next class, bias due to omission of relevant variables. I'll send you up the case.
Question. Sir, what will be the syllabus of next midterm? Till where?
Whatever we do till 18.
Till 18th. Okay, thank you, sir.
Okay, I've been sending you the PPTs without any delay, I hope. Nothing is due. Acha, you have to tell me. I don't know. I asked this question, but I don't know. I mean, my sentiment, this is not there. The first statistics initial part, 1 to 70, I checked that I have introductory part I sent separately. 1 to 70, I don't know if I sent it. Drishan, can you check and tell me?
Sir, I have the PPTs from the third handout to the to whatever you had sent in the last class.
Yeah, that's what I think. The first two hand. Yeah, first 70.
Two handouts are named Basic Statistics A and Basic Statistics B.
You sent both of them in one other mail, yes.
Okay, I sent it with the basic statistics title. Is it? It's not there in my essay, but I have the statistics you have from day one, right?
Yes.
Okay, then it's fine. So only the latest today's due. Today's I'll send it immediately. Okay.
Sir,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
just another question regarding syllabus. So last time we had more of statistics, as in Fisher information matrix.
This is only cumulated syllabus. Last time the weight was 0.2, 20%. This time the weight will be 30%, and the final examination will be 50%. Drishan, it's okay.
Sir, I did not get this last what you said about
The first one was 20%. First test with 20% weight. The next one will be 30%. The last one will be 50%.
Oh, okay.
Because the first one, the last one will be on the entire syllabus, so you'll have 100 points. It will be out of 100.
Okay.
Okay, Paramila. Okay.
Sir, I think her question was last time you did not ask econometrics in second midterm. This time you asked.
Because we did not cover. This time we have covered econometrics. I will ask questions on econometrics. Okay.
Okay, sir. That is. Thank you.
Paramila. Okay.
Yes, sir. And last time you also did Fisher information in statistics.
Fisher, yeah. But this time, no. The Fisher, we did not see much except the formulas. There is no question I will ask on F.
Okay, sir.
Only the formula. Don't forget it. Who will remember the PDF and all? I did not prove anything about Fisher distribution, so don't bother. Whatever is there in the PPT, you prepare accordingly.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Bye. You go and attend the next class. Bye. We'll see you tomorrow. Next class.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.